Welcome back to the Quick Focus Blueprint program. Let's jump into this. When we're talking about your focus, and we're in the home stretch of this program, really the goal is to make focus a habit, right? Because first you make your habits and then your habits make you. We want it to be so that you're doing it like second nature. It's something that's part of your routine. It's not something that you have to force yourself to be able to do. And so I think putting together routines, we talked about having a morning routine and how I jumpstart my focus every single morning. But how do you apply that towards the things you want to do? So for example, let's say you want to read more. Let's say you want to journal. You want to meditate. You want to make it a habit of creating a brain focus smoothie every single morning. You want to stretch. You want to say, I love you. You want to do X. Whatever it is, I want you to think about a habit that you like to add into your daily life. And so think about a habit, and I'm going to give you a framework on how habits work, because most people, we have these habits, right? I think I read recently about 40% of what we do every single day is as a habit. It's habitual. And so best you understand how habits are created, why you do what you do, and also how to break habits. And so habit, when we're talking about specifically focus, we talked about focus is not something you have, it's something that you do, that there's a recipe and a routine for having better focus. And so I am going to pull on the research from Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit. And some of you have read the work, so this will be kind of an elaboration and a review. Some of you are not familiar with this work, and I recommend that you pick this book up. And so there are 3 parts to a habit. There are 3 parts, and this what they call a loop. And this is one really simple neurological loop at the core of every habit, and it consists of 3 parts. He calls it a cue, a routine, and a reward. A cue, C-U-E, routine, and reward. Many of you know I like iteration, so I'm going to actually refer to this as a reminder, a routine, and a reward. A reminder, routine, reward. So I like the 3 R's because we use reminders all the time when it comes to memory training, because that's really what it is. A cue is a trigger or a reminder to do certain things or to remember something. And so this is how it works. I'm going to give you this framework. And while I'm going through this, what I want you to do is think about your own habits so you could have an awareness of what is your reminder, what your routine is, and the reward you get for doing that routine. And so while I'm giving you this information, this framework or this loop, if you will, I want you to picture the habits that you're doing and notice yourself inside of them and see, oh, that is my reminder. Oh, that is my routine that I go automatically, and this is the reward I get. And then what I want you to do is I want you to think about a new habit that you'd like to create. A new habit you'd like to create so you could have better focus. And I want you to apply this framework towards doing that. And so I'm going to walk you through this right now, and you'll understand as we go. So to understand your own habits, you need to identify the components of your loop, right? Your reminder, your routine, and your reward. And so you're kind of doing this thing called like a self-diagnostic, where you're going through and you're thinking about a particular behavior, and you can look for different ways to maybe replace old habits or vices with new and more empowering routines. So for example, when we talk about a reminder, reward, routine, let's say, just off the top of my head, a reminder is what triggers you to perform a specific routine. And so that's what you're doing, and the reward is what you're trying to get by doing that routine. So for example, let's say you get bored. You get bored, and so the routine would be to open your Instagram and you start checking for likes, or you start browsing through your social media. And the reward you're getting for it, you had your reminder, you're bored. You had your routine, which is opening up your phone and going through your social media. And the reward is you get this dopamine fix and you feel connected, or you feel entertained, or you feel significant. And so the concept is, when you understand how these reminders or these triggers work, because they're triggering a routine or a habit, and why you're doing it, which is the reward, then you could change the routine in the middle of it, because there's this gap. Deepak Chopra talks about this gap between a stimulus and your response, that you don't have to just react to a stimulus, that there is this gap where you could decide what something means, what to focus on, and what to do. And there you'll have infinite choice. So instead of opening your phone, for example, you could open up, let's say, your Kindle, and maybe instead you read. That's meeting a reward for you. So it has the same trigger, meaning the reminder, your boredom, but instead you're getting the same reward also, meaning you're getting entertained, but you're doing it in a way that empowers you instead of something that maybe is distracting you. And since this is a program all about focus and overcoming distraction, so knowing now this framework, what I want you to do is have fun with this. And you don't have to be perfect at this right away, because what do you start that's you haven't done before consciously that you're just perfect and really great at? So what you want to do is experiment. So for example, let's say that you have a particular habit. Let's say you're at work and you just go and you just have to get this brownie, and you do it every single day. You get a brownie and a cup of coffee in the middle of the day. And so what I want you to do is don't try to necessarily change that behavior overnight, but instead, maybe it's the first day of your experiment, you feel the urge to go across the street during work and go to the coffee house and get a coffee, and you buy this brownie. Instead, you just adjust your routine a little bit to see if you could get a different reward. So for example, instead of going across the street, maybe you go outside and you go around the block and you go back to your desk without eating anything. And then maybe the next day you experiment and you go to the cafeteria and you buy an apple, right? And you eat it at your desk. You just move things around a little bit, and you just get curious about how things got programmed into your mind and why you were getting that brownie in the first place. Maybe the next day, instead of going to the coffee place and getting a brownie again, instead you go outside, you go for a run, and you end up chatting with your friends. And you mix things up a little bit because you get the idea. What you choose to do instead of buying the brownie isn't really that important. The point of this experiment is to really test different hypotheses to determine which craving is really driving your routine. What's the reward you're really going for? Are you craving the brownie itself, or are you really craving a break from your studying or a break from your work? If it's the brownie, is it because you're hungry, in which case maybe that apple should work just as well? Or if you're looking for a burst of energy that maybe you get from that coffee and from that brownie? And so what is the reward that you're actually looking for? And so you could experiment with this, and maybe you're testing 3 or 4 or 5 different rewards, and you could also go and look for patterns. And that's what I think it's really great. You could go through a self-coaching process. Maybe after each activity, you jot down on a piece of paper the first 2 or 3 or 4 things that come to your mind when you get back to work. Maybe there are feelings that you have. Maybe they are just random thoughts or something you're reflecting on. And then just write down the first words that come into your head. And then what you do is you set an alarm, let's say for 10 minutes. And when it goes off, ask yourself, do you still feel the urge to go across the street and get that coffee and that brownie? And the reason why it's important to write, these down 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4, 5 things is even if they don't have a lot of meaning to you, it helps you to do 2 things. First, it forces you to have momentary self-awareness of what you're feeling and what you're thinking, your thoughts. And number 2, what it allows you to do is studies show that writing down these words help at later recalling what you were thinking at the moment. So at the end of these experiments, when you're reviewing your notes, it's much easier to remember what you were thinking and what you were feeling in that precise snapshot of a moment, because you scribbled down the words, and it'll help you to be able to recollect and recall this information better. And just a little bit of detail in terms of how these reminders work. You could identify the categories of behaviors ahead of time. And so, for example, we'd always talk about the power of organization when it comes to memory and it comes to focus. And so there's some good information that's science-based where experiments have shown that almost all habitual cues or reminders, if you will, fall into one of 5 categories: location, time, emotions, people, or immediately preceding an action. And so I'll say that one more time. The reminders fall into usually one of 5 categories. What's going to trigger you to do the habit to get the reward? It's either a location. You walk into a room and you get tired or you get excited. or maybe at work, or maybe in your desk. There's something that provides a trigger, the location. Time, like maybe the time of day, like maybe at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you start losing focus, and it's consistent. The time is the trigger that sets off your routine and gets you your reward. If it's not that, it could be your feelings, your emotional state. Maybe when you feel, like we talked about, you feel bored, automatically you go to Facebook. So the emotional state is the reminder. Maybe it's other people. You meet somebody, and that every time you're with that person, you feel something, and maybe you need to do something. So maybe you're around this person and you just feel the need to drink or to smoke or do something productive. Like whenever you're with this person, you just feel like, man, I want to laugh. Or you go into a routine of exercising because that's what you associate. That person reminds you of this. There's certain people that, and I've talked about this in the program, that I'm around. I just feel so productive because they are my reminder, or my cue, my trigger, if you will, to getting into the state and just being very productive, because they are very productive. And then finally, number 5 is immediately preceding an action. Like you go and there's some kind of action that just happens, some kind of behavior, and it leads to something else. And so that is the part of the reminder. The routine itself is the habit that you want to build. Another word for routine, because I like iteration, could be the recipe. What is the recipe? So for example, if you want to be able to read more, part of what I do is I go in, and when I go in my desk, I have a book waiting for me there, and that book in that specific location reminds me to pick it up, and then I read every single morning for 30 minutes. You know, when I was telling you about my morning routine, I have my brain power tea, my brain tea, if you will, and then automatically I feel like writing. It's just trigger every single time. Every time I take that action and I want to go and have my brain tea, I automatically think, where's my journal, right? Because I condition the tea is the reminder, the journaling is the routine or the recipe, the step-by-step of what I'm doing, and the reward of it comes from actually sitting down. I feel centered. I have had some reflection time. I feel insightful. I feel clarity after writing in my journal. And so my question for you is this, is look at your current habits that serve you or don't serve you, and notice, what is your reminder? What's the actual routine? And then finally, what's the reward that you're getting because of that? And my second question for you, and you could put this in the comments, is what new habit would you like to employ? Find a habit, discover a habit, think about a habit that you'd like to add to your repertoire. Remember, first you create your habits, and then your habits create you. Maybe your habit is to make a brain power smoothie every single morning. You're like, great, that is the routine, and you know what the routine is. You could break it down into, okay, first I'm going to get my blueberries, then I'm going to get my green leafy vegetables, and then I'm going to get my avocado, and then I'm going to get my spring water and some ice and so on. That's the actual recipe or routine. And then what's going to be your reminder for that? What's going to be your reminder? What comes right before that that triggers you to say, oh, I want to make my brain power smoothie? And so maybe it's a behavior. Maybe you just got out of maybe you just took a cold shower and you reset your nervous system, and that's the trigger. Or maybe you get hungry. That's an emotional state. Or maybe it's time, meaning you set an alarm, and at 7:30 you have your brain power smoothie every morning. Or maybe it's location, that whenever you walk in the kitchen first thing in the morning, that location is the reminder to do the routine of making a brain power smoothie. And then what's the reward? The reward could be, I have energy. The reward could be, I feel lighter, I look better, and just because I'm eating well, right? And so analyze your current habits, and what I want you to do in the comments section is, I want you to write down one new habit, and then I want you to break it down. What is your reminder? What's the actual routine or the habit, the behavior itself, and then what's the reward you're going to get for completing that routine? Put that in the comments right now. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow, and thanks for making this a habit.